Brother Malusi. Before we can begin, I just want to make sure that people that are on the agenda are on here already. So Reverend Wandile Dlamini, is he on? Our provincial chaplain.
According to what I have currently, it doesn't seem that our Reverend has been able to join us.
Not a problem. Our backup plan is my brother Tolani. I was not aware he's also a chaplain, but I see his name says chaplain there, so he will cover that part for our opening prayer. I just want to confirm that Reverend Vicentia Kgabe is here. Very well. Basitsana, our president, are you here? Very well. Muleboheng from Lesotho region, are you here? Muleboheng?
It seems like Molly has not joined at this point.
Molly, did we lose Molly? She was on. She just
Molly
mentioned
is
that
here.
she is here. Very well then, we shall begin. My name, for those who do not know me, is Ryan Toby Goloti, lay minister in the Saldanha Bay Diocese, currently the GET of the Anglican Students Federation, and it is really an honor for me this evening to be convening this courageous conversation this evening for all of us. First and foremost, I would like to begin with a prayer to call on God's presence as we discuss this very delicate and very sensitive matter that pertains to God's church and God's mission into the world. I therefore invite Polani from KZN region to please open for us with a prayer.
I will be speaking in Zulu, be praying in Zulu rather. I hope people won't be offended by that. I'll start off by greeting Gibingelele, Abaspete Leadership Yetu, and our speaker, our Reverend, and then I'll start praying. Ekamenleise, Ndodana, Nomayongwele. Nasibusuku baba siza kuwe ngokubonga ukhulu bakho namandla akho. Sibonga impilo baba, sibonga ukuhlangana kwethu namhlanje ebusuku. Sithi kulokuhlangana kwethu via iZoom awube uwena okhulumayo, ake sibone ukukhanya kwakho. Awukuthi into esikhulumayo kube into eyakhayo, akungabi into ezohluthula imoya yethu. Makube ubukhulu bakho obuzovela la. Ake kube intobeko nokuthokoza ukuhlangana kwethu la. Ukuthi ispeaker sethu sobe addressa kube into ezosakha. Sikhulekela nabangekho la, sikhulekele ifederation yethu, sikhulekele ibandla lethu lonkana, sikhulekele lesi sifo ukhuvethe esibhekene nalo. Siyazi baba kubi, kodwa sithi may will be done. Ngoba akukho baba kwenza emhlabeni ungazi, akukho kwenza emhlabeni ungavumanga. Sithi-ke nabasemajele, basesibhedlela ube nabo. sithi iba nohulumeni wethu, ube nosolifefe wethu, Metropolitan yethu Thabo Makgoba, ube nabefundisi bethu, ngibeka nesilo samabandla Nkululeko. Izifiso zethu Nkosi uyazazi, izinhliziyo zethu uyazazi. Ngithi lapho masixoleleke inhliziyo zethu la ziyaluza khona. We will pray together Our Father, the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, we forgive those who trespass against us.
Did we lose Toby?
Unmute to Toby.
Sorry about that. The host mistakenly unmuted me and I could not participate. But nonetheless, thank you very much, Kolani, for that wonderful prayer. We really appreciate being able to and affording to be able to call on God to join us this evening. I'd like to welcome everyone that has made it possible to be here. I would like to welcome specifically all the clergy that have made it this evening. I can see there's a few clergy with us, Reverend Mulder from Rondebosch, Father Marty, Reverend Marty, in fact. You see, as we go on, we learn these ways of life affirming. Reverend Marty, we welcome you, the chaplain of AYF in the Diocese of Saldanha Bay. I'd like to welcome all associates and friends of the Anglican Students Federation. More especially, we'd like to welcome into the space our guest, Reverend Kgabe, for being so generous with her time and willingness to always engage us when we call on her door. It is indeed an indication that you hold students dear to your heart at all times. For those who do not know who Reverend Vicentia Kgabe is, please lend me your ear for a few seconds. Reverend Canon Dr. Vicentia Kgabe is a priest in the Church of God and was ordained to the priesthood in 2002. She is currently the rector of the College of Transfiguration Theological College. The college is the only residential seminary and training center in the Anglican Church of Southern Africa. She was appointed to this position in 2014, and she holds a PhD in practical theology from the University of Pretoria. Reverend Kgabe is no stranger to the Anglican Students Federation, having served as a member and no doubtly as a chaplain in her own space in the Diocese of Johannesburg. And therefore we welcome you, Moruti Vicentia Kgabe.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so we welcome you all to the space, ASF friends that are present, current members, and old members. We hope that it will be as fruitful as we hope this conversation will be, this courageous conversation. And the wording was chosen specifically as a courageous one because it is not an easy subject that we are engaging in, and therefore we felt spiritually courageous to have it with our dear Dr. Vicentia. I'd like to give just a bit of background to why we are here. We come here this week on Saturday, given in mind that earlier in the week, on the 22nd of July, we were celebrating or remembering Mary Magdalene, an apostle to the apostles. For those that do not know, she came from the city of Magdala. However, like many women, Mary Magdalene's character has been misrepresented in the Bible. Her story has been told very badly throughout the history of the church and the history of the Christianity as a faith as a whole. One of the very few women, Mary Magdalene, who's been mentioned in all four of our Gospels, not only mentioned as a woman, just like other women have been mentioned, or not only has she been mentioned as someone's wife or someone's servant, but she's been mentioned by her name as Mary Magdalene, not only by her name, but by her place of origin, something that was reserved only for male characters during those narratives. There are many stories that have been told to continue and continue to be told about Mary, either in books, in our articles that we read, or in movies, or in any place that we see, where Mary's story has been told from a very patriarchal perspective, where she has been portrayed as a scandalous, a prostitute, or a loose woman. However, all these overlook numerous characters of Mary, which should serve as examples for us as we endeavor to follow Christ, such as she was the first person to witness that Jesus Christ has risen, and she was the first one to tell everyone, including the apostles, about Jesus Christ's resurrection. She supported Jesus' ministry financially and spiritually. She is an apostle to the apostles. She stood faithfully at the feet of Jesus on the cross. And yet, this is not often highlighted in sermons that we hear every Sunday, in teachings that we receive from our parents or from our peers, in conversations that we have amongst ourselves as students. Like Mary, many women in the church are heroines and role models and leaders and good examples of what it means to live a life that is Christ-like. However, their stories are untold in the church leadership. There's hardly any women in the positions, if any. This and many other brute other ways are examples of how the church is complicit in the abuse of women simply because of their gender. It is therefore befitting for us as an organization of the church, for us as students and scholars, that we meet in her memory this evening. I therefore invite Moleboheng from the region of Lesotho to read out the concept note to our guest speaker, Reverend Kgabe, of which she will offer a response to it.
Good evening, everyone. While media attention seems to suggest that gender-based violence is predominantly a secular sketch that is somehow committed by immoral monsters and strangers in society, the recent #Church2 movement suggests otherwise. For example, several cases of gender-based violence in the Anglican Church of Southern Africa, which have come to the fore since 2018, indicates how serious the problem is within the church. As an organization within the church, we have observed that gender-based violence in the church is not only prevalent, but on the increase. Issues around the misuse of power are often hidden and swept under the carpet. Instead of justice, we often see priests simply being transferred to different parishes as if that will solve the problem. In what ways is our church complicit in the gendered abuse of its congregants? And as students, how can we play a role in eradicating this global pandemic?
Thank you very much for the Malusi. Can I ask that from now on? Don't mute me. I don't know if it's from your side or anything. Just for the.
It's not from my side.
All right, not a problem. Thank you so much, Molebuheng, for that concept note. I do believe Reverend Vicentia heard that concept note. It is just a mood setting, and we would like a response for it. But before she can go on, I just want to ask everyone's mics to be off. I am still getting a few feedbacks from people's mics. On your laptop or on your phone, there should be an option on your bottom left where you can put off your mic. Very well then. Reverend Kgabe, we ask you to reflect and give a response to this in your capacity as a religious leader, in your capacity as an academic, in your capacity as a female clergy, and in your capacity as an ASF friend within the Anglican Church of Southern Africa, who shares the interest in achieving a gender equal society within the church and within society at large. Over to you, Reverend Kgabe.
Thank you, Toby. Thank you all. It is wonderful to gather with you this evening. By this time, I'm already asleep because I'm not a night owl. I'm an early riser, so I do my work around 4 a.m., 5 a.m. So by this time, I'm exhausted. But I'm learning new things about this Zoom thing and that you don't need to sleep. You're working constantly. And thank you to SG and Toby for and the executive and leadership for extending this invitation for me to gather with you. I would have loved to have other kind of gatherings with you and not necessarily this matter, but it is so important and pertinent that we cannot overlook it. I know by this time in your calendar, you'll be coming back from some fun for a week in some diocese, in some country. I miss those very, very cold ASF conferences, but I know they have revived us and have enabled us to be where we are. In responding to the concept note, very true that for a long time, the church is very active. It's very in tune with what's happening in the society, and it's quick to respond, to do media release, to have rebukes over the pulpit and what we see in politics, in finances, in corporates. But when the matter is within us, we are not that active. We don't act as quickly as we should. And I think because, I think there's a sort of saying, that when the wound is with you, you know how to circulate, you know where to touch, you know when not to touch. And then you allow that wound to fester. And this is where we are. The wound has been with us forever. The wound has been with us before even we can say the missionaries came to our shores to tell us about God, the way they understood God, because as Africans, we have our own ways of how we understood God and worshiped and prayed. And the way that this church of ours has dealt with the wound is, as it was said in the concept note, about playing chairs with clergy. That we will move you to this place and we won't tell you the people in that parish some of the reasons why we're bringing you there. We have played chairs by having private disciplinary hearings where you don't get to know what has happened in that disciplinary hearing. And in some cases, we have had the women who've been violated to say, I was not even asked to come and say anything. I went into that space and it was hostile in those kind of things. So we are saying our silence has been sinful. And this is something that I had to deal with myself, that my silence is sinful. How do I continue to be silent and overlook what is happening to my sisters. And in other instances, what is happening to my brothers. And in other instances, what is happening to those who could be my children. And I feel that one has to talk. Whether we are branded and given names, that doesn't solve the problem. That shifts the problem for a minute. So we are now at the point where we're saying we know what the problem is. We think we know what causes the problem. The challenge is, how do we deal with this problem and deal with it thoroughly without wanting to protect our image as a church, because at this moment it is in tatters. We need to fix ourselves. So that will be my response.
Thank you very much, Reverend Kgabe, for that response. It is merely a reflection on the concept note. I do believe we will engage each other further. I just want to highlight just a summary of what will be happening from now. We have about 9 prepared questions, which were asked from different students from different regions to put forward for Reverend Kgabe to respond to. I do wish to highlight that Reverend Kgabe responds in her personal capacity, which is the same way that we requested her presence, not on behalf of the College of Transfiguration or not on behalf of the Anglican Church. But hence I said she responds in her capacity as an academic, in her capacity as a religious leader, in her capacity as Vicentia Kgabe. Therefore, without any further ado, there will be 3 rounds. Each round will consist of 3 questions, which she will respond to collectively. And thereafter, we will take some questions from the floor. And given the time that we have, I will then give my own discretion as to how many rounds of each questions we'll take from the floor. Reverend Kgabe, are you ready? I will read out the first 3 questions for you. Muruti Vicentia Wankutla?
Yes, I hear that.
Very well. The first question comes from the Eastern Cape region, and it reads as follows. We know from sessions we have had with our GET that there are texts of terror in the Bible which promote gender-based violence. However, we only interrogate these texts in our university spaces at NSOC level and at our provincial level as ASF conferences. However, we never engage these texts in our parishes. Our parishes never preach on them, they never highlight them. Whenever they are there in the lectionary, they are simply ignored. Why is that? That is the first question from Eastern Cape region. And then the second question reads as follows. When do we plan to stop gender-based violence as a whole? From the apologists, from the clergy, from the perpetrators, from the police not taking it seriously, from the government not really taking charge like they should. That question comes from the Lesotho region. Our third question comes from the Limpopo region, and it reads as follows. Our priests or our clergy seem to not have the necessary psychological, ethical background into how to deal with complaints of gender-based violence. Instead of, they often say, let's pray about it. What effort is the church or the College of Transfiguration doing in order to train ordinance on counseling or pastoral care specifically to gender-based cases? That's from Limpopo region. Those are the first 3 questions. Over to you, Reverend Kgabe.
All right, thank you. These are really not, I play with your questions. They are very deep, and I will be as honest as responding to this question as the honesty is in asking them. Number 1, in terms of the text of terror, we are that kind of a church that has a lectionary to guide our daily devotions, whether it's morning or evening offices, weekday Eucharist, and principal services that we have on Sunday, that we have those readings set out. And for a long time, we were using what is called the Common Lectionary, and you still find it, or those readings are in your prayer books of the Common Lectionary. They didn't include most of the text of terror. They were very, very sanitized in terms of that, from the 3 cycles that we have, year A, year B, year C. You have those things. A few years ago, we moved away from the Common Lectionary to what we call the Revised Common Lectionary. And you have it now in the lectionaries that we have. I think it's, what, 5 or so years ago when we moved to Revised Common Lectionary. And the Revised Common Lectionary is not only for Anglicans, it's for all the Protestant churches. So what we read as Anglicans in South Africa, they are read throughout the Communion. The Presbyterians, the Methodists, and many other denominations share the same readings that we have on Sunday. And we have seen that most of the texts of terror are starting to appear. They started to appear on the weekday services, and most of us, I don't think we really pay much to lectionary during the week. We pay more attention on the lectionary on Sunday, and when you get on Sunday, they might not be there necessarily, or when they're there, the text will start somewhere and end just before where, you know, the heart of the text is. And when you try to connect it the next week, it's some other story. So that has been the challenge that we've been dealing with, to say, when the texts of terror are there, how do we handle it? And the reason why my colleagues do not preach on these texts, I don't know. I wish I knew, but I can assume certain things on why they're not dealing with it. I suspect that having 4 readings a Sunday as Anglicans with our principal services, when I say 4, people say, no, it's 3. It's 4 because we have the Old Testament reading, we have the Psalm, which people don't think a Psalm is a reading, it's in the Bible. We have the epistles, which will be the second reading, and we have the gospel. So we have those 4 readings that are there. So it is easy at times for us to move away from not preaching on those texts, which majority will be on the Old Testament. So we avoid dealing with that. But it's easy for my colleagues to go to the epistles, to preach about what Paul says about women. And so there's a kind of double standard in terms of that. The rebuke that Paul has on women, we get to hear about it preached, but the text of terror in the Old Testament, we don't hear about that. So that's one, I think it's avoidance. 2, I suspect it could be the issue of not being well equipped to handle this text. When we read a text like Judges, which has been one of the texts that one has been meditating on, Judges chapter 19, of what, and the text says this woman is a concubine. That just tells you a story when you've been named as Mapapeni. You know, that's just not a good story from the beginning. And that says, you know, I can offer you the boys. That's another thing. You know, I at times I just kind of stop when I read the Bible and say, like, Uncle Sam, who was writing these things? You know, I can offer you the man. You do as you like with this man. And, you know, what does that mean? And it means for me in that context, that was a norm. That was nothing new, you know. So today we don't want the boys. We want this woman. As like, I can give you my daughter. And they're like, no, we don't want, no, hey. You know, those are the kind of things that when you're not well equipped to question what the text is saying, who wrote the text, what was the context, what genre is this, you know, is it fiction, is it real, is it just one of the things that someone was just putting, is it poetry? So when we're not well equipped on how to handle this, you're going to have a problem. So you decide, no, I'm not going to deal with it. And if you take it literally, it's going to make your head hurt. You know, your head is going to spin. So, and what other sources do you bring forth? So my thing is that, you know, a sermon is not something that you prepare the night before you preach or an hour before you preach. You have to prepare because you're able to deal with these things. I think another reason, the third one that I assume could be the reason why this text of terror are not preached on, is the fear of the parishioners. What are the people going to say if I preach about this? You know, remember, we want for people to be receptive to our sermons. We want people to have good things to say. And now with COVID, we no longer have, and we won't have for a long time, that moment after the service where we wait at the end of the door and shake hands and tell each other lies. Hey, your sermon was good. What was good about the sermon? You know, people don't tell you what was good about the sermon. You know, people don't engage you on that. So, and when they engage you, at times they're being defensive, or they're like, hey, you told them today. Who are those people that I told them? What about you? What did you hear? So those are the kind of things that we need to start dealing with. So that's number one. But I feel that it's avoidance. I have other texts to preach on, so I'll avoid this one. No, I won't talk about it. Two is a well-prepared sermon. You hear it, it moves you, it challenges you, it makes you to question things, it enlightens you. And again, it's the fear of the parishioners that we have. So my thing is, what we can't relegate this only to Sunday. What about during the week? What about Bible studies? What about organizational meetings? We need to have other spaces besides the Sunday monologue that we get from a priest to be able to engage in this text. So question number two is, where do we stop gender-based violence as a whole? Well, I wish it was magic. I wish we could stop it. I know people who say we're exhausted of hearing about gender-based violence. We can't be exhausted if we don't have remedies on dealing with this. One of the things is that part and processes of stopping gender-based violence is to stop the teachings that we have that talks about women being inferior, about seeing women as property, about seeing women as weak, about speaking about women as if they are objects. This is one of the things, you know, this is a process of starting to deal with it. But another thing that Sia Kolisi said this week is that he said, if we educate our sons, then we don't need to protect our daughters. That's what moved me when Sia said that this week. We have to educate our sons, then we don't need to protect our daughters. And my thing is, what are we saying to our children? What are we saying to our nephews and nieces? What are we saying to each other? That's important. Those of you who are following what is happening on the media lately, 2 days ago, if it's not yesterday, AOC, the rep in the United States, in their Congress, who was called effing bitch, got a space to talk to the Congress and to us. And one thing that she said so many things that were important, but one of the things that she had said is that this man who called me this and did this to me, to verbally said these things to me, was standing with another colleague who said nothing. And this is what has happened, that we have stood next to people who have disrespected women. We have said nothing to them. We have never called them to order. And this is how we start. And the start of stopping gender-based violence. We need to be vocal. We need to be responsible. We need to take it. It is your baby now. It is your challenge. It's no longer mine alone. All of us are in this together. And number three, it's about clergy not having necessary psychological things. I haven't assessed them. I don't know what psychological qualities that you are looking for or assessing on in this. So I'm going to be very careful on how I deal with this. question. And I can speak on, because the second part of the question is about what is the college doing in this matter. I always say to our seminarians when they come here and to the sponsors that the college is not the beginning or the end of someone's journey of discerning a calling. Before they get here, there should have been a process that has dealt with and raised the issues and the character of someone who's coming into the ministry. You know, in terms of what are we looking for? And I'm afraid to ask that question now because people are telling me things. When I say, when you're looking for a priest, what are you looking for? The bar is very high. And I think the church needs to be equipped to deal with what people are looking for and needing in a priest. So by the time they get here, we continue the process, and we hope that when they leave the college, the church will run with that process. One of the things is that the issue of morality, ethics, the issue of gender-based violence, the issue of patriarchy and all those kind of things are part of our curricula. When we deal with the biblicals, we deal in terms of how women are portrayed or how men are portrayed in our scripture. When we go to systematics and ethical class and things, we talk about the morality, practical theology classes, we deal with these matters. As part of our formation, when we talk outside of class, how do we deal with these matters? And in terms of our workshops outside of class, outside of chapel, what do we do? So we're serious about that. And I'm serious about dealing with issues of harassment in our college. Whether males are harassed or females are harassed, I take that matter seriously. People have been expelled, disciplinary processes have been instituted. We don't play games. I tell my students that the way you speak to each other, give someone a license on how they're going to talk about you or talk to you. So this is where we are. We deal with these matters. One of the things that I was reflecting on in this question is, for me to see how well we have done with our students on this matter, it will be when they face these issues themselves. When they are rectors, when they are priests in charge, when they are bishops, this is when we will see if we have done a good job. You know, on paper, whether it's an assignment or a project, it might look like people get it, but it's until you're faced with an issue that when you see if you've done a good job in imparting knowledge to the person in that. Clergy schools, you know, our dioceses have what they call clergy schools, meeting once a month, clergy meetings, they have retreats. This has to be part of that. How do we empower our clergy in what we call ongoing formation, ongoing education? We need to have these issues. If we don't have the skills in-house, we need to outsource. You know, we need to ask experts and partner, as we're doing at the college, partner with other organizations, because we're not all skilled in this matter, to deal with this and deal with this matter. So our clergy persons have to say, if I don't have the knowledge, they can't sit there and say, I didn't know. I think for me, when someone is asked something and they say, I don't know, it's a sign for me of laziness. If you don't know, go and seek the answers. Go and seek knowledge. You can't sit there. That's not an excuse anymore to say, I didn't know that I had to deal with this kind of things. So my thing is, if someone has been equipped and they fail, there's something in the system that needs to be corrected. We need to look at why we keep on empowering people and then they fail in these matters in that. So those are the three questions that you have asked.
Thank you very much, Reverend Kgabe. And I would like to pick up from that last point that you mentioned about how then when they have to deal with these matters, and it speaks volumes into the next three questions that actually speak directly into the practicality of being a minister. One of them is that if priests go to training at the college, And the curriculum that you spoke about is that the curriculum is there. However, you cannot per se say as to why it's not being practicalized and how what I would call post-ordination training is not happening in dioceses. This comes to this question that comes from the Northern Cape region, which says that why are women more scared of going to the church for support when abused than anywhere else in society? And this comes from the understanding that when you report a case of any type of abuse at church, specifically gender-based violence or sexual violence, the usual response is, let's pray about it. And this is not necessarily to negate the power of prayer, but it's just simply to say some matters are psychological, some matters, they are emotional, they deserve a type of treatment that will acknowledge that perhaps this is a psychological matter than a spiritual matter. And later on, you will find out that spirituality and psychologically actually work together. So I do find a very similarity or an interlink between the previous question that was asked about what the college is doing to equip ministers in such a way that their first response is not, let's pray about it, which speaks volumes into what you were saying about to be able to say, I don't know, but there should be referrals or there should be other ways, instead of just saying, I don't know, let's pray about it. Because that, for me, speaks volumes as to why women are scared to go to church for any kind of support when it comes to sexual violence. The second question says, in that same spirit, why is the church?
Tony, before you go to the second question, I didn't answer the part of prayer, and I should omit that. One of the things about prayer is that prayer can heal and prayer can wound. And part of the things that have been said in prayer have been hurtful to people. So even if you go and pray to try to seek help, the words that you utter, can be hurtful. And that's my thing, is that as powerful as prayer is, I believe in the power of prayer. That should not be the first port of call when you have a person saying, I have been raped, I have been battered, I've been you can't, after that, your next point of call shouldn't be, let us pray. What are you praying for? Did this person ask you to pray? And I think this is where, in terms of how do we equip our students in terms of counseling sessions. We have practical sessions that we practice in my class. The distance in terms of where you sit with the person who seeks help. Don't be touchy-touchy. We have seen what touchy-touchy has done. It caused more damage in terms of that. How do you organize your space in terms of way that a person feels welcomed, feels cared for, and feels that I'm going to be helped in this situation? So don't lay hands. Already hands have been laid in a very negative way. Don't rush and say, let me pray for you, and end up wanting to cast out demons when this has nothing to do with demons. So I'm very, very particular about not rushing to pray until you know exactly what you're praying for. Yeah. So that's,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Reverend Kgabe. So the next two questions, which is part of this second section of the questions, I'm going to combine them because I can see that they're actually quite related, though they come from respectively Western Cape region and the GPNP region. It reads as follows. We keep having conversations about gender-based violence as if it's something new. Why does the church always convene to talk about resolutions and pass resolutions to tackle gender-based violence, but yet they end up in the air? On the same note, why is the church ultimately turning a blind eye to gender-based violence happening in the church? I'll give you 1 minute just to answer that, Reverend.
We are that kind of a church that loves talking. Look where we are and what we're doing now. We are that talking church. And the fact that we are episcopally led and synodically governed, it means we talk all the time. And we will continue to talk until we stop talking and start acting. The fact that our synods, whether diocesan or provincial, meets after 3 years, and in between you either have a diocesan council or you have PSC, and it seems like there's no kind of follow-up in most of the things. it creates a problem. So if we raised issue of gender-based violence in last year with a provincial synod, we have to wait for 3 years to pick it up. What has happened in between? So that's where the problem is in terms of not doing follow-up in terms of that. I don't know why we can't be turning a blind eye when we know the people we sit next to in the pew are either abused or are perpetrators. I cannot understand how we turn a blind eye when we know this very well. So this is why I say our silence has been sinful in these matters. That's a minute they say.
Thank you very much for that, Reverend Kgabe. I don't think whoever asked that questions is quite satisfied with that, because it really reaffirms what they thought, in that we keep having these conversations. And I think for all of us as students, even within our own resolutions, never mind gender-based violence, we meet every time for provincial conference, but resolutions don't get passed. And I think just to follow up on that, Reverend Kgabe, to your knowledge, does the church, when a motion or a resolution is passed at synod, especially with regards to gender-based violence, between those 3 years or 4 years or 5 years to the next synod, are the systems in place to be accountable to that resolution? Or is it just a matter of each parish, each diocese does whatever they can to follow that resolution?
This is a matter that I think hasn't been handled properly in many times. As we sit now as the Anglican Church of Southern Africa, we do not have a dedicated person dealing with issues of gender-based violence. We used to have a gender-based violence desk. We said, desk is too small, give us an office. You know, that kind of an analogy, don't give me a desk, I want an office. And that it gets, supported in all those kind of things, and it was not. So now it has been the responsibility of Hope Africa to deal with this amongst its programs. And it's doing a good job. But what are the dioceses doing? Dioceses that don't deal with this matter. Dioceses don't have such kind of offices or desks. So that's the things, we resolve, it goes into our files. It depends on individuals on how they're gonna run with these matters.
Thank you very much for that. I think now that person is clear. Thank you so much, Reverend. I'll go to the last round before we go to the floor, and I'll just say them all in consecutively. The first one says, why, and this one comes from an ASF friend, which is someone like you, Reverend Vicentia, an old
I didn't
member.
ask this one. They shouldn't say I did.
Come again?
I didn't ask this one. Don't say me.
No. I'm saying the second question now, coming from an ASF friend, someone that is also shares the same status with you within this gathering, as an ASF friend, a proud one at that time. And it reads as follows: why are our male clergy always over friendly with us as young girls or women in the church? Are there any standards which the Anglican Church holds their priests by when it comes to interacting with women? If yes, how come no one knows about them?
Wow.
That's the first one. The second one says, in your view, what do you think is the biggest fear of people, mostly male clergy, with regards to letting go of our church's patriarchal traditions of being an Anglican that comes from the KZN region? The last one says, how do you envision an Anglican church free of gender-based violence? That comes from an ASF friend. Over to you.
Yeah. The ASF friend one, in terms of male being over-friendly. It's a tough one. Because the over-friendliness, from what some of us have had and experienced, it has connotations. It's not over-friendly because they want to be your friend. It's over-friendly because there's an objective to that kind of friendship. It breaks my heart when this male clergy is over-friendly and married. Wow. And expect to be respected. How do you do that? How do you do that? It just, so here we are. We do have standards that we need to keep and uphold. And one, we start with ordination charge. And I think it's on page 560 something there, where the liturgy of things, the things that we are called and affirmed to do. Number two, we have codes of conduct and pastoral standards and shepherds of the flock and the canons. And now they've brought in Safe Church, and there's common sense. My problem is we cannot allow this to continue. We need to call a thing what it is. Because I know of many young women who have stopped, and not only young women, who have stopped going to church because they don't like the attention they're receiving from the clergy. They just don't like it. So that's my thing, is that there are standards, but people need to be called out for their behavior in that. And I think that's what the Me Too movement was doing. But in the church, it hasn't kind of done the deed. We're still coming to that, where people are going to name people for their behaviors. And my thing about the biggest fear, and as it's been put, mostly clergy, about letting go of patriarchy, one of the things that people are worried is what is going to be replaced with. We live in a system when some system is taken out, there should be a new one that comes in. So people are thinking, so if we're no longer going to be dealing or adhering to patriarchy, are we going to do matriarchy? No, we shouldn't be replacing some system with a system that doesn't give life, that doesn't allow people to be who they are and flourish. We're not flipping the coin here. We are saying we believe that all of us are created and fashioned in the image and likeness of God. So all of us have been endowed with the gifts that God has endowed to all that God has given birth to. So we can't have systems that puts others above others, and in a way that it oppresses them. So that's a fear in that. And the fear of what I'm hearing, if you take away my title, if you take away Father, what I'm gonna be, go and study and be a doctor. That's another nice title there. Or do MBA, or go and be a lawyer, we'll call you advocate. There are many titles, but you need to work hard for them. So that's where I am. That don't worry about what we're going to call Father. Go and work for another title that we do there. And how do I envision the Anglican Church free? This is what I vision. This is what I hope for. Because imagine if we are in a place where all of us can be who we are and who we're meant to be. That we can go and get to church without people saying what undressed while you walk, suggestive things being said about you, catcalling or whatever it is. It is possible. We can lead this. You are going to be lay leaders in our church. You're going to be clergy, some of you. Let's start that church now. Let's start visioning and doing that now. Let's create a space that your children, my children, our grandchildren will be able to be in a church that is free of gender-based violence, because we have done the work now, not later. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's the thing. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Reverend. Really insightful knowledge. And I think it just reaffirmed some of the things you said. Really, I saw by the nods of the heads, it reaffirmed some of the feelings really that people have been feeling, and that students have been feeling, that young people have been feeling regarding gender-based violence in the church. I'd like to now, without further ado, open it up to the floor. Just a few rules regarding that. Malusi, our General Secretary, will be monitoring this. I do hope that he can probably see everyone. If you could just unmute yourself and note yourself, whoever you are, then we will see how many. We'll take 3 questions for now. I'm quite mindful of time. We have about 25 minutes left. Therefore, for this answer and question session, I will give 15 minutes, and then the 5 minutes we'll use it for closing. Over to you, Malusi, and the floor. So you may be able to ask any burning question. Remember, this is a social, it's not a panel academic discussion. Therefore, even the questions are not in any chronological order. It's just a matter of getting the conversation started. And we do hope, as Reverend Kgabe has told us that she's always available for us to engage further. We just wanted to get the ball rolling. So therefore, you're allowed to ask any question that you want to ask regarding gender-based violence in the church. I do ask that we just become mindful of respect for mutuality, which is just the general stuff. Mutual respect in whatever you're asking, and just the sensitivity of the matter. Thank you. Over to the floor.
Well, goodbye, Reverend River. How it's going to work, and it will be very easy if we do this. If you check at the bottom of your screen, you have the option to raise a hand, and as you do that, your name will just reflect on my screen, and I'll just call out your name. In that way, we won't speak over each other. So can you just look for that option, raise your hand there, and I'll call out your name. You get that?
Gosh, it's a full house and nobody wants a question. I can go to sleep now.
It does seem like there are no questions. ASFers, friends. Oh, no caller. Speak.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Reverend, and thank you for such a lovely, I'll call it a presentation. I did join late, but I did get the content of what you were saying. But then I wanted to ask a question that I have seen underlined or not taken seriously. Let's say someone has experienced patriarchy or a patriarchal behavior from a reverend. Who then do you tell? Because a lot of people look up to the clergy. They are our rock, our pillars, the people we have to run to. And then sometimes they do trust them more than they trust us. So you might have experienced some GBV from a reverend. Who then do you report to? And how can you be protected from the church as well? We've seen on TV whereby there was a reverend that was raping children, but then the parish was not supporting their children, rather they were supporting the reverend. So how can we make sure that in the Anglican Church, the people that do report GBV that was done by the clergy or any elder from the church are being protected, and that their self-esteem is not taken down from them, and they can actually go back and feel safe at church? Thank you.
Thank you, Nopolo. Well, as we look now in terms of the structures that we have in terms of reporting, so you're going to report a male behavior to other males in terms of that, whether they are archdeacons or canons or bishop. So it's male on top of male and top of male, which at times becomes a bottleneck that you are not taken very seriously with that. And you're told, no, you took it serious. You know, that was a joke. When your system tells you this is not a joke, believe yourself in that. And what we're seeing now is, it seems like the church takes this matter seriously when you go outside of the church structures to address this matter. Whether you go to the police or you look for help from other organizations, it seems like that's the only time they pay attention. But what we know with the system is, even our courts will say, did you follow your church procedures? So your case might not go anywhere else because you have to go back and follow the process. So my thing is, we need to make sure that our structures have people who will have our best interest. When we people in positions, We make sure that these are the people who are going to care for us, for our well-being, for those that we care for in terms of that. And my thing is that being a priest doesn't make you a jack of all trades. I don't know what is a female equivalent of jack of all trades in there. You can't be Miss Know-it-all. You need to have people in their lay people to come and help you through this process in that. One of the things that we have had is that families have been part of the stumbling block in reporting some of these cases. It'd be like, abantu bazothini with our family if you go and say this. You know, and you get held back from reporting some of this case because our parents have positions in the church. They want to be the next church wardens or the leader of the choir or BMG or MU. So suddenly your issue becomes about their kind of leadership roles and status in the church. So my thing is, we're seeing that. How do we have you as young people in those structures? How do we use your expertise and your education to help in those processes rather than just living things the way they are? So yeah, that'd be my answer there.
For the new entrants, you just raise your hand through the function that Zoom has. Check the bottom of the screen. Then I'll call your name, you'll speak. Olani Kuzwa, your hand is
up. Greet again. I'd like to apologize. I had to leave the Zoom earlier. There was an emergency at home, but I'm back now. I don't know if you guys mentioned this earlier. Just to respond to what you were saying, there are mechanisms within the Anglican Church. The one that we have now that I see that it's working. We have a thing called Safe Church. So maybe perhaps our GET can share an email of Safe Church, and you can email them to report such behaviors and such issues. So there's that method you can use. That's me for now.
Oh, Bulela, your hand is up.
Thanks, Melusi, and greetings to everyone. I'm sorry, I was also in and out. Perhaps one would want to raise a concern with regards to gender-based violence. I'm yet to hear someone who's going to link gender-based violence with the traditions that we have, you know, in our homes. Link it to the traditions that we have in our own family backgrounds, not link it to the church, because it also starts from home, where we've seen that we are muscular or we are more important than women. Number two, we speak about gender-based violence when it comes to women, you know, being abused or being, you know, minimized by someone at church. But have we ever thought about it that even the question of gender-based should be introduced at the Sunday school level, where we are told on how to know that we are equal as human beings. You know, I grew up, my mom, maybe knowing that my mom is not as powerful as my father. You understand? So that was linked directly to my cultures, was linked directly to my traditions. So at least at some point, I would want someone to link it to how we grew up, and how we did things in our own families and so on. It's not a matter of me asking a question, but I just want someone to give me that perspective, because even today I still feel with my fiance now, I feel like I'm more important or I'm more muscular than her. You understand? Thanks.
Yeah. And that's very important, Aya, in terms of that. And one of the things that the anthropologists are looking into is what is being told, what's going to be told to you when you get married, and what's going to be told to your fiancé when they get married in terms of the behavior, where a male will be encouraged not to sleep home because that's not what the married man does. But the woman has to be home and cooking and cleaning and giving birth to your children. And it comes back to the church in terms of, do we still have clergy who insist on doing premarital counseling? Because that is important, because this matters needs to be addressed. You know, where if you're marrying from different cultures, you say, when you get married to Basotho, this is what is going to be expected of you. And when you're marrying into Amaxhosa, and what is my role in that? We need to talk about those things, both in and outside of the church. But my thing is that the church is that kind of a sacred space where these things are either perpetuated, and when they're perpetuated, they're perpetuated very silently. You know, when a new Makoti comes to church, there'll be those women in the church who says, let's come and tell you how we do things here. In there. So it is interconnected. It is highly interconnected, and that's where my thing is. If we de-link it, we might lose something. And the issue of gender is broad. Gender is not only male or female. We need to be able to understand that. And we relegate it to only female or male. And at the moment, we have taken a conscious decision to highlight women being abused. I'm very mindful, and I know of men who are abused. I know of children who are abused. We need to take up that matter and deal with it. So I'm thankful for you highlighting those matters.
Well, with that, I'm not noting any hand. I don't wish to close anybody out. If it's the function you cannot use, I think you can just speak now. Karabo.
Good evening to everybody and all protocols observed. Thank you, Reverend, for the session that you have given to us today. While listening to all that was being said, something came to mind as to, it seems like when our priests leave the transfiguration, what happens in the dioceses or parishes is, it's on them. And there's no way whereby now the College of Transfiguration can, or the church in general, can come back and even see whether these people are doing their job right. I think at this point, leaving it into the hands of the bishops on the specific diocese or the priests for that parish is one thing that's killing us. But now, as a rector at the College of Transfiguration, and the programs that are put in place to help build our priests and make sure that they actually be the person that they're actually supposed to be as they are taught. How is the College of Transfiguration making sure that that happens? Because you've realized and seen what the problem is. And we know that they actually become very blindfolded to it. We have been crying. The church cries. We know the problems. But then as you sit in your panels, what are you then saying that, okay, because then probably this specific department is not really helping with the gender-based violence issue when it comes to this context, then is there any talks that are being spoken about into an alternative route and making sure that priests don't necessarily just rely on the fact that I'm a priest, I know, or the on their own, it's fine, maybe they will deal with it. How are you going back as a matter of report now to see that the people are actually satisfied with what is happening? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Kgabe. One of the many issues that comes into this, and I tell some of my students, and they take it as a joke. They get here within 3 months, they call each other father. You know, really. Already their focus is on the title, and I'm sure it's remunerations, and they walk like one. You know, and they know how I feel about that. So they say it in the corner, or they call it that when they don't see me. So that's a problem. We say to some of our students that some of them, when they come to college, they already have bought a purple shirt and a mitre in that. The focus is on the status and the leadership. And so some of the being at college is to go through the process of being here and living in that. And then it gets to a point of the responsibility of the diocese. My thing is, there are processes in this place, like in every other profession, unless you're an entrepreneur. But even if you're an entrepreneur, you don't start with a Fortune 1000 business or whatever it is. You start small and you build up. You start as an intern and you build up. Somehow the church seems to have taken that process of lending you into a job and preparing you for that. People can leave college and within a year they're becoming rectors of the parish. That is spelling danger. We know what's coming. It's so obvious. You know, that's why we talk about curacies. Train and do an internship, study someone else in terms of how they do things before you get your own parish. I come from a Diocese of Johannesburg where we were identified, some of us, for leadership. And before we were rectors, I think I did 5 or 6 curacies. But one was just, I didn't want responsibility. I just got like, I used the issue, I'm still young, until it got exhausted. But we were taken through a process in terms of how do you care for a parish, which is the buck stops with you. So that for me was important in that. I don't know if they're still doing that now. Another thing that happens is our students, some of them go into a place where there's no support system. They become the law unto themselves until they get into trouble. So that's the thing. So we have identified those things, and I think 2 or 3 years ago, I said we need to have a survey. We need to ask our students, what have we taught them? Is it working where they are? Where are the gaps? And it was, you know, the response was overwhelming, because what we have prepared them, we realized was not adequate for what they are asked to do. And then we said we will have what we call spring school or summer school during September when we're on break, to use that time to plug in the gap, get the experts from anywhere in the world to be able to help them, and to for this place to have a time to get together and compare notes into what's happening. The response to that was poor. You know, clergy didn't respond to the summer schools the way we had expected. Those who came, it has served them well, and we're seeing that. So we're not going to tire doing that. We're going to continue to do that, evaluate our curriculum, and see what's happening. The BTH course has helped us to have a kind of internship before people leave college, that they spend time in the parish and then they come back to college towards their final year, so that we can be able to see if what we're doing is working. So we'll continue to tweak what we're doing at the college to help our students. But remember, not all the clergy are sent to college, and the diocese has to take care of the programs that they create for clergy who are not sent at the college.
The lack of hands will signal to me that the
Secretary.
Okay, there is an hand. Khahli, so your hand is up.
Thank you, GS. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, I don't know if I'm going to be asking a question or if I'll be having a comment, but my mantra will always be charity begins at home. But fortunately, or most unfortunately, we cannot now change people who do not see gender-based violence as gender-based violence. Another point is that already the abusers that we have, or the abusers that are in society, most probably they've seen it done somewhere whereby it was never called out, which is why they find it so difficult to understand when somebody decides to touch you inappropriately and then a person decides to say, no, unadlala. It's because we do not understand what is meant by not violating a person's space. Or another person will tell you, hi, but I've seen whatever you also have. So there's nothing special about what I'm touching or what I'm seeing at the moment. That is my comment. So by me saying charity begins at home is that in the near future, or we're already parents to young children. So what we need to be instilling into our daughters and our sons of whatever sexuality that they will be choosing is to teach them to stay away from people's spaces. Stay away from my space, even if I'm your mother or even if I'm your father. If you do not consent to me hugging you or touching your hair or whatever, then accept that and teach them that, Wuti, Nana, if Tato at preschool tells you, don't touch me, do not touch Tato and do not ask Tato, why don't you want me to be touched? That is where we're going to start be teaching these little ones so that when they get to the College of Transfiguration and they are taught courses whereby they need to learn when you want to anoint a person and a person does not want to be anointed, you understand. Because now you can't start teaching a 27-year-old who's been thinking, no, I want to anoint and I have a right to anoint. Now, you want to give him or her a 3-year course whereby you need to teach him not to anoint a person. 27 years, this thing is right. So it's going to take another 27 years for this person to learn a new habit. And in that 27 years, how many women and men are abused at that time? You understand? So my point is that we need to firstly understand what is meant by gender-based violence. The slightest thing that is off, as you telling me, Wuti, I have a nice curve, or Haibo, what happened when you lost weight? That is you abusing me, and I need to tell you, and you need to understand that. And already, if you're a parent, you also need to teach your child, Wuti, Yazi, if a black woman says, don't touch my hair, don't ask why. Don't touch that person's hair. That is where you learn, Wuti. Let us stay away from people's spaces. Yes. That is my 5 million rand worth of a comment.
It is very expensive. It is so expensive. I get it. You know what? I won't comment. You said it all. You said it all. You said it all.
This is, I'm drawing the formalish session to a close now. Salafera, I'm sorry. Salafera, is there any other hand that will come after Salafera? Because I don't want you to say I'm closing and then a hand comes up. So Salafera's hand noted. Karabo's hand noted.
Don't worry, GS. I'll let you know when I relieve you. I see you're getting comfortable at the convening seat.
So Salafera, is that a hand, Toby? Salafera, then Karabo.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Reverend.
Hello.
Okay, mine is just to add on, I think to add on what Khaliso was saying. To me, I think we mustn't stop teaching. We mustn't stop teaching even if for the next 27 years,
that person still believes that whatever they're doing is right. Let's continue teaching, let's continue talking. Just maybe in the next 27 years, that person will understand that actually what I have been doing was wrong. And that person can actually change another person's life. Let's also have conversations at home. I know it's very difficult to unlearn, and it's very difficult to teach someone something very new at old age, you understand? But for those who are coming after us, our little sisters, let's have these conversations with our parents to just try, because you never know, maybe something will work. You'll never know, you'll change something or someone's mind, you understand? That's just my 2 cents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Silifera. Thank you. But there's a sense of agency. 27 years is a long time. Let's talk about 27 minutes. How can we do this as soon as possible?
On what Kgatlisa and Silvera has actually said, I think I still find it very much the critical question with this whole thing is that there's something that can be done with an infant that's growing. But then us saying it is so difficult to unlearn, it's like, it's easy to normalize the fact that a 35-year-old can carry on with what they are doing. And I think the important question and something that still lies unanswered and still not being done is, how do we stop a 35-year-old or someone that has grown into this culture in stopping what they are doing? Because it doesn't mean that, you know, they usually say one potato rots the rest of the potatoes in a box. And it could be that one person, 35-year-old, that hasn't changed, that later changes a 20-year-old. I think that's where now the question is, what do we then do about this very much factor that is still lying there and very much spoiling all these? And it's up to us as the youth to decide how we are going to go about this. However, we are faced with the fact that the youth is still not given space to voice out in the church spaces. It's like the church only calls out on us when they need us. And it is easy to have the authority of the churches oppress the youth down because of the power that they have and the positions that they hold. As the organization ASF, we tend to very much challenge most of the stuff that happens in our parishes, in our dioceses. But however, it is so difficult, being as young as we are, to face upon the clergy on its own. How do we, I think this one, Reverend, if we can actually answer it, as in your advice as a former ASF member and a friend, how would you say that then to give us the light as to if you could possibly then try this out? Because I think you can see it in both ways, being a rector and having been an ASF member. How do we then get guidance? Because we don't even get to have such conversations to know exactly where to go, because everyone is just looking out for themselves, especially the clergy. Thank you.
Yeah. One of the things that I know, and in my own little sphere of influence, whether at home or here at college, is that there are consequences for bad behavior. You know, when you behave badly, there are consequences to that. And I think people need to know that, that when I say no, I mean no. And if there's a process that I need to follow for you to get a no, whether through a person or a process, I will do that. That's number one. Number two, one thing that I knew when we were at ASF, when we were youth was that we are powerful. And I don't know how you have substituted that power with what you feel as timidity. There's nothing as powerful as a Black educated person. Don't underestimate that. You're gifted, young, Black man. You have so much to do. And I think having that pushed us to say, when we get to lead the church, we're going to transform it. And a number of us are either lay or ordained in the leadership of the church because we made a pact. We're going to move together and we're going to transform this church. And when you look at most of the things that we do in either challenging or creating new spaces of engagement, people will say, hey, ASF people love to club together. But we made a pact when we were still students that we're going to do this. So my thing is that don't underestimate the power that you have. In dioceses, in parishes, you can populate, as we do with student elections and lobbying, that when we want a certain candidate, we lobby. We put our heads together, we put that person there. Why can't we do that as ASF? Who goes to parish council? Who goes to diocesan synod? Who goes to provincial synods? As you know by now, all the organizations in the church, including the College of Transfiguration, we are invited to provincial synod. We might be given a chance to speak. We don't necessarily expect that. And we can't vote. So how do we get our issues as ASF, as ISA, as Bernard Mizeki, as Mothers Union and AWF? You need to talk to those who, or put your own as delegates. ASF in dioceses will say, we're going to vote for our own for provincial synod to be reps for the diocese. That's how we get to lobby, and that's how we change systems in that. We have given people power, and we are responsible for that. So if you have made me a powerful person, I will take that. But I know that you can decide tomorrow that I'm no longer powerful and you can take that power away. So that's where you are. That's a strategy. Whom much is given, much is expected. And if that person doesn't deliver, we take that and put it somewhere else. So my thing is, I don't know why you want to underestimate the strength that you have, the wisdom that you have, the organization ways that you have as ASF. You can do it. You can change this church today, not tomorrow. You can turn the tables now. Because those who have been here before you have done that successfully.
So, Beth, so what's going to happen is we're going to have Beth, forgive me for mispronouncing it, and then afterwards, our president, and then Toby, I think you wanted to come in afterwards. In that order.
1 minute each, 1 minute each. Let us wrap it up so that it's impactful.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I just really feel like can I please just add on to what everybody has said? I just really feel like, in as much as we're saying that we should teach people from like a young age to not do these certain things that contribute to gender-based violence, I just really feel like at the end of the day, it is a choice. You can be taught to not do something, but you can still end up doing it anyway. So whether or not you are still going to give a person, like, it's still a choice. Life is a choice, and then you die. So you will tell a 5-year-old, listen, if Tato says don't touch me, don't touch Tato. But if this boy grows up and he feels like, no, Balasa did not say don't touch me, I am going to touch Balasa because she didn't say anything. So I still really feel like, in as much as you can say teach a child while they're still young, at the end of the day, when they grow up, as long as they are an adult, they still have a choice. So generally, I just really feel like, to sum up what I'm trying to say, it's that like we can teach, we can cry, we can shout, we can scream. At the end of the day, we are still going to have people that choose to still carry on causing gender-based violence. And it's really sad. So what happens then? Because at the end of the day, you can teach a child to not do 1, 2, and 3, but they're still going to do that. What do we do in that situation? Thank you.
I think my thing, as I said earlier, that there should be consequences to bad behavior. If someone is not being seen disciplined for doing that, being held accountable, they'll continue to do it. And they might say, oh, when Toby does this, Toby's let off the hook, but when Malusi does that, Malusi is being reprimanded. So it's a clan thing. It's this, tribe versus this other tribe. It shouldn't be. When you say don't touch Tato, you not literally mean Tato, you mean all who look like Tato and are Tatos. You shouldn't be that. So it is important in that. And I know when people get to be disciplined or held accountable, they will always have excuses. Or because I'm Black, or because you don't like me, or because I'm a woman, or because I come from a poor family. Those are excuses. Those background thing doesn't make you to be what you are now, which is a nuisance. And we have to call a thing what it is. So my thing is, with the students here, when there's a disciplinary hearing, they will do like anyone else, want to lobby, want to make excuses. That is not a mitigating factor. You have allowed your friend to do this to other people. You never call them to order. So now when the process is taking place, you want to come and say, but sorry, Rector, this will never happen again. I'm going to make sure it will never happen again because I'm going to set an example with this one for the rest of you. So that's what we need to do with the church. That we know when this priest has done this, I shouldn't even try to do it because I've seen how the church deals with these matters.
Is it Toby?
Are we wrapping it up? I think we are wrapping it up. I don't think there's any other questions. We will have a conversation like this again. I do notice a lot of people that made it. It simply shows the eagerness to participate in such a very touchy conversation. But I do want us to go and take everything that we've heard and reflect on it. And I want to bring it back home. Someone mentioned charity beginning at home. And yes, given again the concept Note talked about, given the recent social media attention, which has put into light certain matters, and we all know what propelled this conversation is what we've seen, the elephant in the room, that the church is dealing with a case of sexual violence. That is what most of you asked for this meeting to actually talk about in a broader sense. And I want to say to us, in as much as that is what became the topic of today, even within ourselves, there's gender-based violence as ASF. So gender-based violence is not necessarily, when we say in the church, it's not just about clergy, right? It's about any kind of sexual harassment, any kind of gender violence that happens within a religious space where we pray together and yet these things happen. And within our own spaces, whether it's at conference, whether it's an NSOC meeting on a Friday evening, whether it's within our meetings, gender-based violence, it's shown there. The narrative we read earlier about Mary Magdalene simply shows us how far and how deep and rooted this problem is. Representation is important. The mere fact that in order to have a female president in ASF is just a matter of ticking the boxes has to end. We need to, and of course, people need to avail themselves knowing very well that I, as Palesa, it's because of my integrity and my ability to lead that I'm selected for this position, not because after 3 years we need to have a female one just to maintain the ticking of the boxes. Up until we do that within our own spaces, to know that we are indeed equal, male and female. So I want us to bring us back when we go reflect, let us reflect everything, every concept, everything that we've spoken about. Ask yourself, let it begin with me. What am I doing within my own NSOC? What am I doing within my own region to ensure that gender equality is actually a lived reality? Because it's easy to point fingers and say priests, priests, priests. But at the end of the day, sometimes what they're doing rubs off on us, and we maintain those things, right? And Ayabulela spoke about Sunday school. We maintain the fact that this one must pray as altar servers, women must cover their hair and their nails and what have you, and men must always come, got up past 8 and just dress up and serve. We need to interrogate those things, all of us. Given that it is a journey, it is a process, but we need to take the step which we've taken today. And I think I want to, from a personal note as GET and from being designated from leadership, to acknowledge everyone's eagerness to participate in this. It is a difficult subject, but it's one that is worth having. So therefore, I don't want us to rely too much on what is the Archbishop doing, what is the Anglican Church doing. But remember, I think COVID-19 has proven that the church is going to be different, right? Mm-hmm. We are the church. It's no longer that idea of what is the bishop doing, what is the priest doing, what are you doing as a church? Because we're all churches in our own homes right now. Every Sunday, we are ideally supposed to be in our own homes, and we are the church. So I want to leave you with those words to say, go look deeply inside your own hearts and inside your own ways of doing things, and ask yourself, are you doing whatever you can to maintain the questions that you've been bringing forward to this conversation? Having said that, Mayor Vicentia, I'm going to give you just 1 minute to just give us a closing. And I specifically say 1 minute because, guys, people of the collar, 1 minute is it's 9 minutes. But
remember, if you're asking favors, don't say nasty things about me.
But thank you so much.
Let me say, Malusi, for reaching out and for inviting to do this, and Toby, as we continue to talk. And many of you that I see on my timeline, it's good to be able to match faces with names now. And it's wonderful that we're gathered here. I just kind of did a quick count. I think there are 15 of us gathered here. It is powerful at this time of the night for young people to be talking church business. That is serious. And my thing is, don't take it for granted. You have just shown how committed you are. And now let's take this energy and transform the structures. Let's take this energy. My thing is, even putting this message out tomorrow morning when we wake up, like Toby did, posting the conversation in the early hours of the morning. When you wake up, you say, young people last night have resolved that they're not going to let the Archbishop or the clergy to decide how safe they want to feel in the church. They're taking charge. They're taking it. That message is going to make people to look at themselves and say, wow, wow. Those who are not here have realized that you had your mini conference and a motion has been passed and a resolution is out. We are no longer going to be silent. I'm not going to be looked in such a way that will make me to feel uncomfortable. Ladies, trust that inner voice. Don't try to shut it out when you know it's uncomfortable and want to make an excuse. Trust that inner voice. It will lead you to places. It will keep you safe. Guys, don't want to be the caretakers. No one has put you to do that. Be your own self, because when you're yourself, you help other guys to be themselves. How you talk about women in your own spaces, it helps other gents to realize the ASF guys are not those guys. Don't talk nonsense about women around them. They will call you to order. We need that. So my thing is, what you have done tonight, it holds so much power. Don't throw it away. You have started changing the structure already by doing this tonight. I'm behind you. I might deny that I was here if you start doing certain things, but I am behind you. I know what you can do, and I'm excited about you being the leaders in our church and leading this way.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Reverend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Over to you, Malusi, for the closing remarks.
Well, thank you, Rev. For those who are asking for the recording, I'll stop the recording now. You'll find it online with the help of Abot and all those people who know computers and everything. As Rev said, you are going to be reporting males to males at some point in a church that has less than 15% of women as does St. Bishops. Even in our own ASF, the PEC has less than 15% women. So that's something that will always be troubling. But let's not get tired of conversations. One professor used always to tell me whenever I ask for solutions, he will say to me, what solutions are you asking for? Because you don't even understand what the problem is. So don't get tired of talking about the problems. But thank you very much, Reverend, for coming and helping us, guiding us throughout all the things that have happened leading up to this very moment as we have this conversation, to members of the Federation for being up at night at this time, friends and associate, President for guiding us, and the entire PEC, towards my brother for continuing to do the work, the good work of the Lord. So Reverend, what's going to happen now as we switch off the recording? We'll now start the normal ASF Zoom socials, which is where this conversation came from to begin with. So we invite everybody, but I heard that you sleep at a certain time, so you're free to go to sleep as well.
After party.
I suspect that you were telling me to live in a very nice way.
No, don't feel like that. So the recording is now stopped.